Okay, welcome to another episode of Photoshop Lightroom TV. I'm your host, Marek Mularczyk from saitraining.co.uk, and this is episode 83, 84, 82. This is episode 82. Now, this is your weekly video podcast about anything Photoshop and Lightroom and photography as well. So one of the things I want to tell you about is recently I had posts, I think there were two, on my blog at PhotoshopLightroomTV about mirrorless cameras, about the emerging market on mirrorless cameras that bring a bridge between SLR cameras and compact cameras, and some advanced compact cameras coming out as well. So what I want to share with you is the new camera that I got, but I'm going to tell you about it after the first tutorial. The first tutorial will be in Photoshop, and I'll be showing you an interesting design effect using the thresholds and black and white conversion in Photoshop. So let's jump into Photoshop. Let me show you the design, and then I'll show you the camera. Here I am inside of Photoshop, and I'm going to show you an interesting design with this image here. First step is I'm going to convert this image to black and white. Well, I'm actually going to unlock the layer. I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll keep the original just in case. I'm going to hide the background layer. Now on layer 1, I'm going to make it into black and white. So I'll go to Image, Adjustments, and I'm looking for Threshold. As you know, Threshold takes the image and converts it to black and white. No midtones, just blacks and whites. I'm going to adjust it, okay, to a moment where I can see some parts of the face. So I can see the nose, I can see the lips, just a bit, maybe something like that. Press OK. Now I'm going to apply a filter to it. So I'm going to go to Filter and Filter Gallery. Okay. Let me just zoom out. Okay. And what I'm going to do here, just going to have a look on some of the filters. I know which filter I'm looking for, but I'm just going to quickly show you some filters and the effect as well. I'm just selecting one filter, and I'll be using the right arrow key to move from one filter to another. And the image updates. I should have changed the resolution. This is the high resolution image, 300 dpi, so it takes a moment to load the filter. You may see the progress bar from time to time, depending on the filter. Progress bar appears at the bottom of the screen. Okay, that's not what I'm looking for. No, you're going to see in just a moment. I'm going to use something from Sketch here. Interesting effect where you can embed the image inside of like a texture, like a paper. And what I'm looking for is this one here, the note paper. So it looks like the image is embedded within the texture of the paper. I'm just going to slightly adjust the settings here. So the image balance, got a 25. Let's see, not much of a change in here. For the graininess, I'm going to keep it quite high, and for the relief I'll go quite high as well. That's too high, maybe somewhere around 12, 11, something like that. Yeah, I'll just press OK. And now the image looks like a texture, like it's been embedded within the piece of paper. Quite an interesting effect, very simple to create. So just to recap the steps, you apply a threshold to the layer, to the image, to change it to black and white, into blacks and whites, no midtones, and then you apply the filter. Okay. Yeah. You can go straight to Filter Gallery, okay, and you find it in here. Welcome back, it's me again. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial in Photoshop on the design effect. Now the camera I wanted to tell you about is this Fujifilm X10. Okay, I'm going to have a review of this camera. A beautiful retro look camera, kind of like an advanced compact and a mirrorless camera. Now it doesn't come with interchangeable lenses, But what I love about this camera is this amazing lens, the Fujinon, the equivalent of 28 to 114 millimeters in 35 millimeter, and the aperture 2.0 to 2.8. Absolutely amazing, and amazing quality images. I'll be posting images from this camera starting from today on Google Plus and Facebook, so have a look on it. I'm going to create a review about this camera as well. Fantastic camera, great lenses, very good magnesium body, so very robust, very good quality, and fits in every pocket. So since I bought it, I've been carrying around wherever I go, everywhere. I love my SLR, but it's just too big and too heavy in most situations. So whenever I travel, I carry this camera. But now let's talk about Lightroom and Photoshop. Now we're going to jump into Lightroom, and I'm going to show you how to take the HDR images, or images that were shot for HDR, and how to create an HDR composite, bring it back into Lightroom. I'll be using Lightroom 4.1, and I'm going to show you some new things we can do now in Lightroom 4.1 with this image. So let's jump into Lightroom first. Here's an exercise in Lightroom. I have these 6 images selected here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to merge them to HDR Pro using Photoshop, and then when I'm back, I'm going to show you some interesting features in Lightroom 4.1. So I've got these 6 images selected. Next step would be to go to Photo, Edit in, Merge to HDR Pro in Photoshop. And I've done it already. I've got the images open in Photoshop. So the images open here, got these 6 images. Okay. And normally what you see in here is the 16-bit option in Merge to HDR Pro. The interesting feature I've noticed in Photoshop when merging to HDR Pro, at least in Photoshop CS6, is Photoshop creates a composite of all the images you open. And what you may notice is, before the Merge to HDR Pro dialog box opens, Photoshop loads the images one by one, and it checks them one at a time. Okay, so got these images selected. I'm just going to change the mode to 32-bit. Okay, I'll check remove ghosts, so the clouds don't move on the image. Okay, looks good. Now I'm going to keep the like that. It doesn't really look like HDR Pro. Or actually, it doesn't look like the majority of HDR Pro images online. It looks like a proper traditional HDR, but we can do even more with that back in Lightroom. And I'm going to press OK to save it, or actually to create the HDR composite and open it in Photoshop, because the image will open back in Photoshop first. And then when it opens, I'm going to save it and jump back into Lightroom, and we'll do all the extra work inside of Lightroom. So the image now will open here inside Photoshop. Okay, as the HDR image. I'm just going to close it, and I'll save it. So I'll click yes, I'll save it. I'm saving it as a TIFF. You're going to notice that in Lightroom in just a moment. It's saving, it's 99% done. It's a really big file, so it takes a moment. The HDR composite might be around 150 to 200 megabytes, because I've used 6 images and they were all raw, so it may take a moment. Let's check how big the file is. In the meantime, if we go to document sizes, yeah, 175 megabytes. Okay, it's done. So I'll minimize Photoshop. Back in Lightroom, there's the TIFF file. You can see the name in here. I'm going to jump into develop module. I'm just pressing D on a keyboard. I'll just minimize the film strip, and now in here, now I know it doesn't look right. I'll start in the basic tab, and now we can increase or decrease the exposure, but notice that up to 10 stops, so the image goes totally white or totally black. That's the 32-bit rendering here inside of Lightroom, 32-bit mode. So I'm going to increase the exposure by about 2 stops, 2.25. Now we can increase the contrast. I'm going to leave it for now. Now with the highlights, I'm just going to tone down the highlights. Then the shadows, I'll make them a bit brighter. take the whites and tone them down a bit as well. Or blacks, make them a bit darker. Now I'm going to crank up the clarity to maximum. Now it starts looking more like HDR that you can see online. We could increase the vibrance, maybe just a touch. Or if you prefer the black and white effect, I'm actually going to desaturate it so it's a nice black and white HDR image. Now I'm almost done here. Go to tone curve, and in tone curve I'm going to change the point curve from linear to medium contrast. It's nice. And then to strong contrast. Okay, and that's the effect I was looking for. That's the final effect. I like that. And that's how you can use Photoshop CS6 and Lightroom 4, actually Lightroom 4.1, for this beautiful HDR effect. And it's a sad moment. This is it. That's the end of this week's episode of Photoshop Lightroom TV, your weekly video podcast about anything Photoshop, Lightroom and photography related. But just before we leave, I'll leave you with the tip of the week. This time this will be a tip of the week in photography in general. Something that's quite common that I hear quite often is people tell me, we love your photographs, great quality, we'd love to have an SLR to take beautiful quality images. But something they love in most situations is when I take images of portraits, people for example, the shallow depth of field. Well, here's what you can do. You don't need to have an SLR camera to have a shallow depth of field in your images. You can buy any camera. But what you'll be looking for when you buy any camera or a lens is the aperture. The lower the value for the aperture, so if it's 2.8, 2.0 or 1.8, the shallower depth of field gets in your images, among more other factors, but just so we don't get too complicated. So for example, if you buy a camera, like when I was looking for this kind of camera, one of the important things for me was the quality of the lens, obviously, the quality of the camera, but also the aperture. Because there are many compacts, there are many bridge cameras, many lenses for SLR cameras, they have apertures like 4.0, 5.6. You won't get that shallow depth of field unless you go with telephoto. So this is my tip for the week for you. Have a look on the aperture setting when you buy a camera. Check the camera or have a look on it. If it's a compact or if it's an SLR lens, it will tell you the aperture on the actual lens. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. I'm Marek Mularczyk from SAItraining.co.uk, and I'm going to see you next week on next episode of Photoshop Lightroom TV. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.